There's a big doping problem in the Olympics, which is, what's been going on for probably a long time. But this has to do with the Russian Olympic athletes for the most part because they retested a bunch of samples from the 2008 Beijing Games, and it turns out that 31 came up as suspicious, 23 are suspected of having to been for doping. So because of the 2014 Sochi Olympics, Russia's track and field program is already banned from international competition. But with the new light and new evidence of the 2008 Olympics and the doping that went on there, they could be facing a serious risk of the entire country being banned from the 2016 Rio Olympics. These things seem to trickle out years after. And why would that be? Well, similar in a way, as the New York Times mentioned, to FIFA corruption. These guys are great at covering it up. The doctors that take place in this test switching, they get, they find different urine samples and they have, I'm not even kidding, like, do you ever see the movie Inside Man?
Yeah.
Clive Owen, when he basically barricades himself into a bank, part of a bank vault, and he stays there for 2 weeks in this little cubby and then waits 2 weeks to pretty much execute the whole robbery, right? Spoiler alert for those who haven't seen Inside Man.
So he robs it?
This is what they've been doing to cover up Russian, at least for the Russians and possibly other countries for their doping scandals, is they basically put themselves and they hand these urine samples, the new ones, through a little hole in the wall via this image from the New York Times. I find it to be pretty shocking, to say the least. So the headline read from the Guardian, Francis, Russians expect to be among failed doping tests from the 2008 Olympics, right? Quote, Russia found last year by World Anti-Doping Agency to have been running a state-sponsored doping program is already at serious risk of having no track and field representation at the Olympics this summer, while the findings from 250 further respective tests from London 2012 will be released later this month. The I.O.C. retested 454 samples from Beijing using new anti-doping techniques that were not available at the time. That actually answers part of the question as to why they don't do it right before. They targeted athletes who were due to compete in Rio, and around 7% of those tests came back positive. Francis Maxwell, what is going on in Russia?
Well, the one thing that I wanted to discuss here, as you can see from our nice little rundown graphic, is will Russian doping cause Cold War II? Now, a little extreme, but it's to get across this message that the United States has a strong role to play. So, stated in the New York Times article, it says it is rare for the United States government to take on sports doping cases. In 2012, the United States Attorney in Los Angeles dropped a 2-year criminal investigation into Lance Armstrong and Postal Service cycling team that explored whether Armstrong and others defrauded sponsors. So it's rare that this happens for the US. But as you just mentioned, sometimes it takes an external source to come in and try and overthrow this corrupt, incestuous environment that's been going on. And it overlaps, by the way. So listen to this, right? So involved the Russian Minister of Sport, named here Mr. Mutko, is a member of FIFA's ruling council. A position that he has held since 2009. He was appointed in 2008 to his current role in Russian government by President Vladimir Putin. So there's no surprise that we have an overlap between the sports that are investigated here for corruption. If you think it's all separate cases, which it may well truly be, you better believe that the same amount of corruption and back-end deals that go on are very similar. It's plagued throughout these world of sports. And that's why I was talking to our EP Dan about this, he was asking the question is, why are the US getting so involved in these separate situations? And the US got involved, of course, with the infamous FIFA investigation that went on last year, with the overthrowing of Sepp Blatter, and the investigation about the Russian World Cup. Well, sometimes it takes that external source to come in and open some eyes, because most of those that are involved within that community are basically paid or taught to look the other way. So it's almost so common within this environment that you need an external source, and it just so happens to be the US, and Russians are pissed about this because they consistently, and now especially Putin came out and said that the US had an agenda with their investigation into the Russian dealings in FIFA, that they had an agenda against him, and they were just trying to remove the World Cup, a huge, obviously, investment that was going into Russia, to remove it from his grasp in a way just to be a direct dig. I don't think it's as simply as black and white as that. I think that it comes into the case that the US are very strong in terms of their investigation tactics. They had a huge role when it came to US sponsorships and corruption within this country. The dealings that went on when it came to FIFA actually happened within American banks. So it was firmly within their jurisdiction to investigate that?
It's two things. One, we are much better at cheating in our own respective sports leagues in America than we are at doing it outside of it. So we do the Olympics clean, we think. Yeah. And look, I find like America feels this need to police. You know, I can't speak for America, but I'm going to police all these world sporting events. And sometimes it can turn out to be good. In terms of FIFA, that's a great example of, you know, at least somebody dropped the hammer on them. Yeah. And in terms of the Olympics and trying to make it fair games, I don't think they're wrong in what they're trying to do. Sometimes the execution of what they're trying to do is not as clean as they would hope it to be. So should we be policing the world of sports if there's any good that comes out of it? Sure, but that's really up to, you know, other countries to cooperate and not cheat. Take a look at this graphic from, I believe it's Radio Free Europe, which tweeted this out. It's a little bit old. It's 2013, but it still followed the same path. When I looked up, I tried to find numbers for 2014 and 2015, and from what I found, Spain surpassed like Belgium in terms of a little bit. Like they got up to about 100 cases of doping violations. But Russia was far and away the leader. Turkey, not far behind. 225 cases and reports of doping violations, more than any other country. Not surprisingly, in power and weightlifting.
Yeah, I mean, have you seen Ivan Drago?
I must break you. What is other, though? Are there people on the curling team for the Winter Olympics?
Just straight launching curling. Launching those curling things down the ice.
Right down the ice.
Yeah.
That makes sense, though. I mean, and track and field is always, actually, for the most part, these marathon runners have like these crazy hydration techniques before they run, and whether it's regarded as doping or cheating has always been, you know, not exactly black and white. But that's really for the audience to decide, too. What should the U.S.'s role be in policing the World Games when it comes to the Olympics and I guess FIFA and all these type of things? And also, should Russia be allowed to compete in all these events that they've been tested positive for?